Welcome to Pyramids on Mars UFO Radio. I'm Kevin Estrella, and my guest that I'm speaking to today, you probably know him from several videos that are circulating YouTube, and I've also had the opportunity to interview him myself. His name is Steve Boucher, and he's from St Catharines, Ontario, and I met him a couple years ago at the Alien Cosmic Expo 2016?
Yeah,
I think it was 2016 I first heard his story, and his story has gone completely viral after the release of his interview. The video within 2 weeks got over 1 million hits, and he's getting a lot of attention now these days in regards to his UFO encounters that have taken place here in the St. Catharines area. But today, Steve's going to be talking about something that is very important related to his UFO experiences and things that he's uncovered. And well, let's just get right down to it. We're going to be talking about pre-birth experiences, pre-birth memories. So he's been asked many times to elaborate in regards to what has happened to him, because he's had many ET experiences, extraterrestrial experiences throughout his entire lifetime, but it's also uncovered other memories from before this lifetime now. Steve, welcome to Pyramids of Mars UFO Radio.
Thank you.
Glad to have you back.
Yeah. Yeah. I had always kind of asked myself, why me, when I started having these experiences and visitations when I was younger, and it bothered me for quite a while. I kept thinking, why do they choose me? Why am I always the one that seems to be abducted? And I got my answer one day when I was working in between drafting jobs at a hardware store, and I was on my lunch break, and I had bought this book, the Nag Hammadi Library. The reason I bought it is because I read I was going to read Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code, and on the back of the book it said that he got a lot of his ideas for that book from the Nag Hammadi Library, and one of those ideas was about Jesus being married to Mary Magdalene. And so I thought, well, I'm going to buy this book, the Nag Hammadi Library, and read it first, and then read Dan Brown's book and see if I reach the same conclusion. And so I bought the Nag Hammadi Library, and I was sitting in my van in the parking lot reading it, and I came across this one place in the book where it talked about being on a high place and seeing the earth from this high place. And so when I read that, it did something, and it opened up a floodgate of memories of when I was a child. I knew this, and as I got older I forgot about it, but it brought it back when I read this part about this high place. And I remembered being on a high place like that with a gray being standing next to me, and it was a pre-birth memory, because I remember the being telling me that I had to go down there, and we looked out, we could see the earth suspended in space like a big beach ball, and from the size that I remember seeing it, we would have had to be in fairly close proximity to it. So I believe that it was someplace on the moon, on a crater on the moon, that we were viewing it from. And this being was telling me that I had to go down to Earth, and I didn't want to go. I had a really strong aversion to going down there. And he said, why are you worried about going down there? And I said, because I've heard so many horrible things about Earth that I just don't want to go. And when I recalled this memory, the fact that I said I heard so many horrible things about Earth tells me that I've never been there before. So that's why I believe that this is my first incarnation.
Yes, you told me about that.
Yeah, and so this high place that we were looking at the earth from, something else it reminded me of was about the scripture in the Bible where the devil took Jesus up to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, the only place you could see all the kingdoms of the earth from, this would have been the perfect vantage point. So I think this was the place, and I believe it's a place that souls are launched from when they're sent to earth. It's a spot and where they're launched from. And this being is like an administrator. I sort of felt that he was like an officer. I had respect for him. I knew him. But he had like some kind of authority to be able to send me down there. And his name was Rigel. So anyway, he was telling me I had to go down there, and I didn't want to go. And I begged and pleaded with him not to send me down there. And he said, I don't know why you're so afraid, but he said there's a fellow that, a soul that just came back from Earth, and maybe if you talk to him, he'll be able to make you feel a little more comfortable about going there. And he said, would you be willing to talk to him? And I said, yeah, okay. And so almost immediately I was transported into this room, and it was a very dimly lit room. There was no furniture in it except one chair in the middle of the floor, and there was a guy sitting in that chair, and he was kind of slumped over, and he didn't look very happy at all. And so I asked him, I said, I understand that you just came back from Earth, from living a life on Earth. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how was it? And he said, well, it's kind of good and kind of bad. And I said, well, is it more good than bad or more bad than good? And he said to me, well, it's, he says, I'm really not the right person to be asking about this. And I said, well, let me put it this way. If you had to go back, would you go back? And he said, well, he says, that's the problem. He says, I have to go back. Mm. And I said, why? And he said, because I didn't complete my mission. Mm. And then at that point, I realized that he had terminated his life. Mm. And he didn't complete his incarnation on Earth, and they were sending him back again. Mm. Okay. So I kind of backed away from him at that point, and then I found myself back on the high place with this gray being standing beside me. And he said, did you talk to him? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, did you make you feel any better about going to Earth? And I said, no. You know, he said, matter of fact, he made me feel worse about it. We can hear the planes in the background here because we're near the airport. And anyway, so he continued to try to coerce me into going down to Earth. And I said, well, what if I refuse? And he says, well, you can't refuse. He says, the council has decreed that you have to go. And I said, well, what if I refuse? And he says, well, he says, if you refuse, believe me, there's a lot worse places they could send you than Earth. And that really made me uncomfortable, because it made me feel like it was a violation of my free will, and that I was being threatened, that if I didn't go, they were going to send me somewhere worse. And so I was pretty upset about it. But anyway, I said, well, I started to give in at that point because I didn't feel I had a choice in the matter. So I said, if I go down there, will you come down and check on me every now and then? And make sure I'm okay. And he said, yes, I will do that. And what I didn't realize at that point was that when I asked him to do that and he agreed, we had made an agreement, like a soul contract. And so when I came down to Earth, before I came down, this is kind of a weird part, because he said to me, I'm going to tell you something that'll help you when you go down there, if you can remember it. And so I said, what's that? And he said, well, if you can find a group of people down there that carry the teachings of a man named Jesus, and you learn those teachings, he says, when you come back here, you'll go to a place far better than you ever believed was possible. And so I said, okay, well, if I go down there, then I'll find this Jesus. And he says, well, he says, it's not that simple. He says, chances are you won't remember any of this. And he says, and the man Jesus is not there anymore, but the people that carry his teachings are still there. And so I said, well, okay, I'll try and find them. And I said, if I go down there, will you come down and check on me? The full scope of what's there.
Full spectrum.
Yeah. And
from X-rays to gamma rays and the small spectrum of light that we actually are visible to see, and then you have
exactly
the ultraviolet section, and
right. And so I realized that at the high end of this, there's a veil, and at the low end of our perception, there's also a veil. And the object of the game, I guess, if you want to be in service to others, is to get past that high barrier. And that's why all the Tibetan monks and ascetics practice meditation, and they're trying to raise their vibration to get beyond that veil and to kind of poke a hole in the consciousness in the fabric of the universe and see what's beyond that, you know. And so I read the Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. I started studying that, and I tend to agree that we are living in a computer simulated universe. It's like a big video game, and we're in these bodies, we incarnate in these bodies, and they're like avatars that we're in to experience this 3D reality. But it's not us. We're not the body. The body is just like a vehicle. And the real us is a consciousness that is joined with all the consciousnesses of every living creature that exists. We're actually a reflection of that consciousness. If you look at your higher self, to me, it's like a big diamond, see, and each facet on that diamond is an incarnated life that you've lived, but it's all part of the same thing. Each facet is separate, and the experiences of it and the characteristics of it are separate from each other, but it's all part of the same diamond. It's all part of the one consciousness. And so that's how I perceive it to myself. And so when I started to realize that we're in a computer simulation, I don't like to call it a holographic universe, because holography is a technology that is done with lasers, and it's done in a special way, but the effect is very similar, you know. So I prefer to think of it as a computer simulated universe. And so each of us at the smallest level, at the Planck level, you can think of that, the smallest level, as a pixel that makes up our existence. So everything is made up of these pixels, these subatomic pixels. And
I've heard theories about this too. It was on a quantum level, and the smallest pixels, actually, it's almost like a triangle. It's like a triangle. Tetrahedron.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole universe is based upon these tetrahedral pieces that are quantum small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody tends to think of, you hear them talk about the Planck level and about the smallest particle that you can get. But what they don't seem to consider is that there's also a smallest aspect of time. The smallest duration of time can be broken down into a very, very tiny duration of time, like a space. And that is something that I think is also part of these pixels. And they're like frames on a camera, on a movie, where each of these pixels make up a different frame. And so anyway, that's just something that I've been sort of researching and experimenting.
Yeah, well, this whole thing with the quantum universe, this could potentially be like some kind of simulation.
Mm-hmm.
The simulation theory is gaining a lot more attention. Elon Musk has talked about it.
Yeah.
Several metaphysical scientists have talked about it, where they've actually looked into, when they get down to the length of the things, they're actually finding binary code written inside the fabrication of the universe.
That's right.
And
that was Jim Gates that discovered that. Down into the fabric of the universe, he found these codes, and they're a special kind of computer code. They're actually the same kind that you find in a browser, in a computer browser, and they're called adinkras, and they're actually symbols. They're different symbols, and if you do some research on adinkras, you find out that they're African symbols that have been around for quite a number of years, and he discovered them in his study of quantum reality and that. And it's kind of amazed a lot of people when he tells his story about that. But I believe that we are in a computer simulation, and when I started to consider that, I started to think of the veil that separates our what we perceive from what we can't perceive. That veil is actually a firewall. It's like a computer firewall that and the beings that we regard as alien beings live on that side of the firewall. And they are the programmers, they're the custodians of the universe, and they basically have a very strong effect on what we perceive and what we live in this reality, even to the point where they can send us down here into a lifetime. And so we're actually like in a giant computer game, and these beings are controlling that. They're the programmers. And it's also where the spirits of the dead reside after they leave a physical body. They go back to that side, and then they have their full cosmic memory returns, and they can evaluate the life that they had just come from, And so anyway, that's the conclusions that I came to about quantum physics.
And I've also had my own run-ins as well, personally, with things I was sharing with you when I was, it was November 21st, 2017, when some strange things happened at work, and I realized that, with Star Nation family were telling me I had to research the Mandela effect, and then through my own discovery, things I knew that it completely changed. That there was no going back. I realized that okay, the timelines had definitely changed, and then it was Nancy Tremaine who contacted me 12 days after I made this discovery, and then she told me that she said, Kevin, I have no idea why I wrote this. I have no idea what it means. Yeah. And there was this it was a long telegram that she wrote the day that that they sent me down the rabbit hole was the day that she wrote it, because she discovered it on a piece of paper the next day in her handwriting. And the whole thing was in relation to this holographic universe. It was realities versus illusions. Okay. This whole message was about realities versus illusions, and that we live in a delusional world of our own making, that we are players in this field, and for our creator's amusement, and the stage is set at birth. This whole message was given to her, and she was directed to give it to me. And it was all in relation to this, exactly what you're talking about this illusions versus reality world. Yeah. What we think is real is not real.
And it makes you wonder, how much free will do we have? Do we really have free will? A lot of people are saying that we create our own reality. That Einstein, I think, was the first one to say that if you match the vibration of what you want, you can't help but get it. It'll come to you. And so in that sense, we actually create our own reality. But I wonder, how much effect do these custodians on the other side have over that? And how much are they influencing what we experience in life? And maybe we may never know the answer to that until we cross over to the other side. I've read a lot of Dolores Cannon's books, and I'm just going to kind of touch on that. There was something that she discovered in doing thousands of hypnotic regression therapy on abductees, and one of the things that she discovered from what they were telling her was that there's this thing called imprints, and these imprints are basically they're lives that people had on Earth that were recorded, because each of our lives is recorded in the Akashic records. And when somebody comes into Earth for the first time that has no experience with what it's like to participate in the reality that we experience here, they have no reference of memories to draw from. It's like a totally new experience, and without some kind of reference memory to draw from, they could make a lot of disastrous mistakes. And so what they do when they do imprints is, before you come down here, the beings will put you in this area where you can download other people's experiences, other people's lives from the Akashic records. Now, they're not your own incarnations that you're picking up, but they're incarnations that other people have had, and they can download these into you. So you, for the most part, in your conscious mind, you feel that maybe this was a previous incarnation that you had, but it might not be yours. It could be somebody else's that has been imprinted.
Like Joan of Arc or Napoleon.
Yeah, and you hear a lot of people that one of the biggest complaints about the idea of reincarnation is, well, everybody seems to think they're Napoleon, or everybody thinks they're Cleopatra. There can't be that many people that have incarnated as Cleopatra or Napoleon. Yeah. Well, imprints would explain that, because particularly for a person who's coming down into this life to live as a soldier, they might want some sort of field experience to draw from, before they go into battle. And so they might choose to have Napoleon's life imprinted into their subconscious or superconscious mind.
Whatever the hot download is, hot YouTube download of the day is.
Yeah. So they're not coming in empty-handed. They're coming in with some sort of experience, even though it's not experience that they've had. It's experience from somebody else's lives. And if you question is that moral to do that, to imprint somebody with somebody else's life? Well, if we're all one anyway, it doesn't really matter, because when you go back to where consciousness comes from, it's the same consciousness that Napoleon experienced, or the same consciousness that Cleopatra experienced, the same consciousness that you and I are experiencing. It's all connected as one. So I guess that kind of justifies it, sort of, But it's an interesting idea to explore. And I don't know if when Dolores Cannon revealed this, if she really knew what she had tapped into there. But it answers a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, a person's subconscious mind contains all the answers that we're looking for in our conscious reality. They're all there at some point in that oneness of consciousness, if we can tap into it. So I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Okay. So the beings, if they want to guide us in this lifetime, or give us some sort of help from the other side without really interfering with our lives, if it's a computer simulation we're living in, and these beings are the custodians of it, they can write little subroutines that can be triggered by certain mnemonics or certain things that we might look at, symbols and stuff like that. That's why a lot of people are influenced by symbols that you see, and you see a lot of symbolism in magic and well, even the Dinkras, the symbolism that is part of our computer codes of life. Those symbols are a way of these beings communicating with us. And
kind of like crop circles.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they try and work with a symbol or a crop circle or something that will trigger something in our unconscious.
Yeah.
To trigger to trigger a deeper learning.
Exactly. And consciously, we may not be aware of these subtle influences from these subroutines, but I believe that they plant little subroutines like that can be triggered by a symbology, and the word that they call that is mnemonics. And what it is mnemonics is just, if you look up the definition of it, it's something to help trigger a memory, to help you remember, like how people might tie a piece of string around their finger to help them remember to do something during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Or they might place an object in a certain position to trigger a memory. When they see that object, they say, oh yeah, I've got to do this.
Yes.
And those are conscious mind mnemonics, but there are also symbols like that trigger our subconscious memory. And the subconscious is like an autonomous being that's functioning on its own, that's separate from our consciousness separated by this veil or firewall, but it's actually part of our being. It's part of us just as much as our conscious life is. And so I started thinking about autonomous memory. And I got this as a download a couple of mornings ago. When I woke up, I had the word autonomous in my head. And I was wondering what it meant, so I started doing a bit of research and looking up the definition. And I came across autonomous memory. And what that is it's the part of the subconscious mind that controls all the automatic behaviors of the human body, like the rate of your heartbeat, the rate of your blinking during the day, how your digestive system reacts to certain acids in the stomach or alkaline, how it balances those things out, when to release these chemicals, and they're all unconscious procedures that we don't even think about consciously. They just happen automatically. They're made to do that, to act that way. And so I started thinking that this is an area of the mind that people who are exploring consciousness and that kind of stuff don't really look at, because they don't think that there's anything there worth looking at. It's just all unconscious information sent to different parts of the body, so they never look at that part of the mind. But what if it's like a big hard drive, and that it actually functions mostly in the subconscious part of our minds? What a perfect place for beings to store subroutines that can be triggered by symbols or mnemonics that, it's a perfect place for it, because we don't think to look there, because it's not something that interests us. We're more interested in the consciousness and that kind of thing. So it's a part of the mind that could be used by these beings to influence our behavior or send us information that will either help us or hinder us in our 3D life. And that depends on the agenda of the beings that are using it. So anyway, that's just something else that I've sort of given some thought to recently. And it all seems to fit together.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about this in the car yesterday, and that's why I wanted for you to get a chance to get it to get it out there of what this information, because it was very important. But no, we are at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto. This is the weekend of June 23rd, 2018. And there's many experiencers here, and many friends and new friends that we were making. But Steve, I'm really glad to be able to have you back on the show again and share more what the information is. I think it's very important for people to understand the larger side of things. But thank you very much for coming on Pyramids and Mars UFO Radio, and looking forward to hearing what else you find out about.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about these things, because usually I've been talking about my experiences that I've had, but I haven't really talked about how it's influenced me spiritually and how it's changed my beliefs and to what degree. And so this is the first time I've had an opportunity to talk about that.
So be able to see it from pre-birth, going through the stage of what they directed you to a deeper understanding, and then even into the quantum level of seeing that much of an expansion.
Right.
Which is what this is all about, the discovery of truth.
Yeah.
So you've come a long way in beyond a lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, folks, this is Kevin Estrella with Pyramids on Mars. This is Steve Boucher. This is Alien Cosmic Expo 2018, and keep your eyes to the skies.